Hey, I'm Dr. Nate Bosch. We're here on a sandbar today in one of our local lakes, Winona Lake. You can see behind me is a stream. This is called Cherry Creek. And as Cherry Creek flows out into this lake, we start to get sediment getting deposited, which has created this sandbar. So let's talk a little bit about how that happens. So right now, this stream is flowing at about 30 gallons per second. Not a whole lot. But under the right conditions, maybe a big rainstorm, thunderstorm in the summertime, maybe a snowmelt event in the wintertime, that amount of water could be 10 times what it is right now. And rather than being fairly clear like it is right now, it's going to have a chocolate milk brown coloration to it. And that chocolate milk color means there's a lot of sediment that's in the water. As that water starts to come out here towards the lake, it's going to slow down as it enters the lake. And as the water slows down, it can no longer hold on to that sediment like it was before. So what happens to the sediment? It starts to deposit on the bottom of the lake, leading to this sandbar. If I pull up some of this sediment here, you can see we've got some gravels in here. We've got some sand, which is a little bit coarser of a soil particle. There's some clays in here as well, a little bit of organic material, which gives it that darker color. And so what we're seeing here is we're seeing everything that used to be up on the land in the drainage area or the watershed of this creek that has come into the creek and then washed into this lake, creating this sandbar. So what impact might that sediment have on our downstream lake? One, it could start to what we call silt out some areas where fish normally would do spawning and lay their eggs. That could cause some problems. It also can bury some areas where we'd have good types of plants, like aquatic macrophytes, we call those, in a lake, and that could be a bad thing as well. But perhaps the worst thing that the sediments bring with them into the lake is something we call nutrients. Nutrients, there's two major types of nutrients in lakes that we keep track of. One is nitrogen and the other is phosphorus. There's different types of nitrogen like ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, even organic nitrogens. There's also different types of phosphorus. It could be particulate or dissolved phosphorus. The dissolved form of phosphorus actually will adsorb onto sediment particles almost like a hitchhiker. So as the sediment particle comes into the lake and settles out, the phosphorus comes right in with it and settles out there as well. And when we get nutrients in the lake, those are going to cause some different things to happen in the lakes themselves. We'll get more plants to grow. We'll get algae to grow, which makes up the base of the food chain in our lakes. And if we get too much nutrients, which is the case in this lake and most of the lakes around the Midwestern United States, we get an excess of those aquatic macrophytes, those weeds, and an excess of algae, that phytoplankton, which can start to cause problems. Too many weeds can start to hinder the ability of recreation. It can start to hinder even the ability for fish in some instances where things start to get too crowded and we don't have that natural type of vegetation and the natural amount of vegetation. On the side of phytoplankton or algae, we can actually have toxic phytoplankton which can grow in our lakes, and those toxins can be harmful to people and their pets. So let's talk about a little bit, where is the sediment coming from as it comes from this stream? Even the ducks out here enjoy this sandbar area. The sediments are going to come in a couple different areas. They'll come from the stream channel itself, and so along the stream channel you'll have areas of erosion. Maybe a tree falls in and what used to be held to the bank with the roots of that tree, now it's exposed dirt and it's open to erosion as the water level starts to increase after a rain event, for example. You also could have the sediment coming from the land itself. Maybe it's an agricultural field that doesn't have a cover crop on it during the fall or winter months or early spring months. Maybe it's a construction site that doesn't properly have the silt fence around that construction site. Maybe it's along a roadway where there's exposed dirt and that could get washed into a roadside ditch, which could go into a stream and then end up into a lake like we are here today. All the while, again, those sediments, as they get washed into the lake, they're bringing with them nutrients into the lake, which can cause some of the problems we see in our lakes with excess weed growth and excess algae growth. All right, so we've talked about some of the problems associated when soil runs off the land and moves into an aquatic environment where we call it sediment, and then creates a sandbar or something like this where I'm standing today. Let's talk about what we can do about it to be a little bit more responsible with those soils in the landscape. So let's start with thinking about that stream channel that might be eroding. There's different restoration techniques that can be done on a stream channel. Probably the simplest is just planting some native plants. Those native plants are well adapted to our area here in the Midwestern United States. They don't need a lot of maintenance as far as nutrients or irrigation. They're going to have deep roots that are going to hold that soil in place rather than allowing it to erode into the stream channel and then come into a downstream lake. We can also look at what can be done up on the land itself, even away from the stream. So let's think about agricultural, since we have a lot of agricultural area around our lakes and streams here in Kosciusko County. Agriculture can have filter strips along edges of fields which can intercept some of those sediments that might be running off. Agriculture can also do things like no-till or cover crops. No-till is, as the name would suggest, not tilling the soil and instead injecting seeds into the soil at different times of the year to grow those cash crops. We also can have cover crops which hold onto the soil in those off times of the year, late in the fall, also into the winter and early spring times, and help hold onto those soils again to help cut down on the erosion. Not just agriculture though. People's properties, a new construction site, for example, of a home being built or a business being built, having silt fences along the edge, maybe even on the outside of the silt fence, having some sort of a filter strip of vegetation that can help, again, intercept some of those soil particles so they don't get into one of our aquatic ecosystems. Thinking about golf courses, for example. What sort of filter strips can be around the edge of the golf course property? Thinking along roadways where sometimes there's exposed soil. How can we cut that down and have grasses, preferably native grasses, in some of those areas? Again, we want to hold on to those soil particles. Nobody wants to lose those soil particles from a golf course or from a yard or from an agricultural field. So let's hold on to them on land rather than letting them get into one of our aquatic systems.